Hello dear learners, welcome to MeghaDiscourse where literature meets excellence. In today's video, we are going to cover Jacobean Age, the darker chapter of English literature. Yet this age followed the positivism and the optimism of Elizabethan age, but this age has evidenced a lot of bloodshed, revenge and disillusionment. There is political disturbance as well, which lacks in Elizabethan age. How? Let's uncover the dark truth of Jacobean age. The term Jacobean comes from Latin word Jacobus, which means King James I, who ruled England from 1603 to 1625 after Queen Elizabeth's death, and he was the cousin of Queen Elizabeth. This period directly followed the Elizabethan age and sometimes often sees its continuation, but with darker side, more introspective tones. This age is also known as the Age of Johnson because of its metaphysical feature. This can be called Age of Satire, Age of Skepticism, and the Age of James I. So when James I ascended the throne, England expected peace and stability. But King James I lacks Elizabeth's charm and her political skill. He was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and united Scotland and England under one crown. And because he lacks charms and the intelligence, so this age saw religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants. Political corruption and court was there. Growing distrust between the king and the parliament, which led to gunpowder plot, and you can say Jesuit treason, which is very important for our exam point of view. What does that gunpowder plot? It happened in 1605. It is one of the most dramatic event of this period. The gunpowder plot was a failed assassination attempt against King James I and the parliament. The major conspirators were Robert Gatsby, he is the leader. Guy Fawkes, who actually caught red-handed Thomas Percy, Thomas Winter, John Wright and so others. They wanted to blow up the House of Lords to restore Catholic rule. But the plan failed and Guy Fawkes was captured on November 5, 1605. This whole incident is known as the gunpowder plot and Jesuit treason. It is a failure. Now, what is the social and economic background of the age? England became wealthier through trade and colonial expansion. London grew as a cultural and commercial hub. Class division widened and moral corruption was increased. So writers began to criticize materialism, hypocrisy and moral decay. Hence the rise of satirical tone. Now the literary background. The Elizabethan spirit of adventure and imagination slowly gave way to realism, intellectualism, skepticism and moral questioning. These four factors dominates the whole period. The Jacobean writers explored the dark side of human nature: deceit, lust, revenge and corruption, disillusionment, betrayal, revenge, so and so. There were two major literary movements dominate this age. The first one is comedy of humor and the second one is metaphysical poetry. We are going to cover both literary movements in this video. So let's move to our first literary movement, comedy of humor. The term humor, it comes from the Greek medical theory of four bodily fluids, and these were sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic and melancholic. This is the table. We have element like sanguine has air element and the qualities of hot and moist, and these type of persons are very cheerful. Second one is choleric, known as yellow bile. Important one, element of choleric is fire. Qualities is hot and dry. They were ambitious people. Phlegmatic means water, cold, moist. They were calm, lazy. And melancholic, they were sad but creative. Cold and dry type of qualities they have. There is earth element in these type of people. So these four are the four fields which is important for comedy of humor. Ben Jonson was the chief dramatist of Jacobean Age and the creator of comedy of humor. Is that humor is dominated trait that controls a person's behavior. Right? Everyman in his humor, Volpone, The Alchemist, and the Bartholomew, and so many works we can see. For example, in Volpone, he writes Volpone, who represents Fox, Mosca, and the Parasite. There is Voltaire, Corbatio, so many characters who exposed greed and hypocrisy. So through these characters, through allegory, he presents the comedy of humor. And you know what? Shakespeare acted in every man in his humor. So what are the features of Ben Jonson comedy of humor? Number one, there is realistic character which is based on moral flaws. They lacked moral qualities, humanity. The next feature is sharp satire. There is a sharp satire on contemporary society which exposes the dark side of society. The next feature is they focused on human follies and they actually laugh on human follies. The next feature is they have controlled structure and classical unity like of Aristotle and Horace. So we can say that Jacobean Age under Ben Jonson, it becomes the mirror of society and it presents the people actually they are. Now let's move to our second literary movement, metaphysical poets. Metaphysical poetry was first used by Samuel Johnson in his book Lives of the Poet, in which he explained 52 poets. And in the first chapter, he coined this term metaphysical poets. As the drama flourished under Johnson, so poetry took a new intellectual form. The writer known as metaphysical poet, they explored philosophy, religion, love through reasoning, wit and unusual comparison, that is conceit or extended metaphor. Samuel Johnson writes that these metaphysical poets were actually the man of learning, and their work and the ambition of all metaphysical poets are to show their learning, to present their learning in a well structured form. So there are some features of metaphysical poetry which is very important to get that knowledge exactly. So first feature is intellectual and philosophical theme. All metaphysical poets write with philosophical and intellectual theme like life, death, love, God and soul. The next feature they used conceit and extended metaphor. It is bold and fast-fetched comparison like the conceit of compass and the fleha used by John Donne. The next feature they have wit and paradox. They were very witty and they mocked at human folly. Feature is colloquial language. Actually, these all features are very important. Colloquial language means they have conversational tone. They write like they are conversing with people, they are communicating with people directly. And the next is fusion of thought and feeling. They write deeply. They like in T.S. Eliot's word, unification of sensibility, and T.S. Eliot has also wrote metaphysical poets in which he coined the term dissociation of sensibility. The next one is abrupt opening. You can see their poems, often it starts in medias res. Medias res means in between. When you read the poem starts and you just feel like how the poem starts and what does actually mean. Sometimes it may confuse the person. For example, the canonization, he writes, "For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love you." It is difficult to have idea while reading first line. So we have to finish it complete to have a complete idea of and complete ideology of the writer. The next and the last feature is religious intensity. Their poetry is very spiritual, like the good morrow, the sun rising. So major metaphysical poets were John Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, Henry Vaughan and Richard Croshaw. So these all are very important metaphysical poets and let's have a look on them. John Donne, known as the father of metaphysical poetry. He was very witty, bold and deeply intellectual. His poetry reflects spiritual passion and worldly love. Important works like Songs and Sonnets, the Fleha, the Canonization, Valediction Forbidden Morning, The Good Morrow, Holy Sonnet. Like in the poem Fleha, he has given the example of Fleha, that is the conceit. It becomes the symbol of physical union between two lovers. The another one is Compass from a Valediction, Forbidden Morning, a pair of compass which compares lovers' souls. One stays fixed and other moves, but remain connected. And the another one is from the Canonization. He turns lovers into saint of love. He says like, call us what you will, we are made such by love. Another one is Andrew Marvell, a bridge between metaphysical poet and classical poetry. His tone combines wit with sensuous beauty and reflection. And the difference between John Donne and other metaphysical poets is that John Donne wrote staunch wit, but other writers like Andrew Marvell, Richard Croshaw, they were very polite while handling conceit. The major works of Andrew Marvell is To His Choir Mistress. He wrote like, Had we but word enough and time, which is a perfect metaphysical conceit on time and love. And he wrote in Garden, he celebrates peace and purity, solitude. Next writer is George Herbert. He was known for his religious devotion and symbolic imagery. In his poetry, The Temple, which is his famous collection, and another is The Collar and The Pulley, he writes, Man is denied rest, so he always seeks to God. The writer is Henry Vaughan, is known for his poetry, Selects Quaternions. The next is Richard Croshaw, known for his Delights of the Muses and Steps to Temple. So these all were metaphysical poets and their important poems. We have King James Bible, written in 1611, one of the greatest literary achievement of this age. It was commissioned by King James I, and this English translation of Bible unified language and style. It gave English prose a majestic and rhythmic and poetic tone. Many later writers, including Milton and John Bunyan, they were influenced by their diction. Now let's explore the broader literary genres beyond metaphysical poetry and Johnsonian drama. We have Jacobean tragedy. The tragic drama of this age become darker and more psychological than Elizabethan times. We read in Elizabethan Age in the University Wit section that Thomas Keat has developed revenge tragedy, and this revenge tragedy tradition moved forward to Jacobean tragedy. And writers explored the theme of revenge, corruption and human frailty. Important dramatists were number 1, John Webster, famous Duchess of Malfi and the White Devil. In the Duchess of Malfi, the story of the Duchess of Malfi and her two brothers, Cardinal and Ferdinand, killed her because of the estate. So these kind of revenge tragedy can be seen in this age. It's deep psychological side, and they explores sin and death. The next is Thomas Middleton, The Changeling, Woman Beware Woman, again the theme of revenge, and it blends realism with moral decay. The next is Beaumont and Fletcher, Rose, Philaster, The Maid's Tragedy, which combined romance and tragedy, and they have polished verse. So these tragedy reflected pessimism and moral confusion of the Jacobean society. Next type we have comedy besides Johnson. So John Marston, who wrote bitter and satirical comedy, Thomas Dekker, The Shoemaker Holiday, important one, which is simple and humorous. The next is again Francis Beaumont and John Fletcher. They wrote romantic comedies which is full of elegance. So Jacobean's comedy shifted from Shakespeare joy to cynicism and irony. Actually, comedy is also used to mock at human follies. The next is prose and essays. Francis Bacon continued to dominate their prose. He wrote essays in 1625, which is include of truth, of studies and of revenge, such type of essays. And he is called the father of prose for his clear and aphoristic style. The next is Robert Burton. He wrote The Anatomy of Melancholy in 1621, which is a scholarly, humorous analysis of sadness and human folly. The next we have King James Bible, which is mentioned a monumental prose achievement. Also, we have Ben Jonson's lyrical poetry like To Cecilia, Drink Me Only with Thine Eyes, important and my favorite lines. The next is Robert Herrick, To the Virgins, To Make Much of Time. We will read and we read it in Cavalier poetry. So these poets formed the Cavalier school, and which is very graceful and musical and worldly, and they influenced Johnson's classicism. So last but not the least, so the Jacobean Age is not only the continuation of Elizabethan glory, but it is the mirror of human folly, human complexity, human frailty. So it is the age of Ben Jonson's satire and John Donne metaphysical poetry. It is the age of growing realism, skepticism, intellectualism. That was the Jacobean Age, an era where laughter becomes moral and poetry turned philosophical. And if you love this section, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe to MeghaDiscourse, your one-stop platform for mastering English literature. Stay tuned and keep learning beautifully. Bye-bye.